Hello, and welcome to Did You Know Gaming Extra. In this episode, we'll be exploring some trivia for the most successful Xbox console thus far, the Xbox 360. The system sold a whopping 85 million units in its lifetime, more than the combined sales of both the original Xbox and Xbox One. The 360 was released in November of 2005 as part of the 7th generation of video game consoles, and was in direct competition with the Nintendo Wii and PlayStation 3. There's since been over 1,000 titles released for the platform, not including the hundreds of Xbox Live Arcade games. One of the system's most defining games was Gears of War, which was responsible for Microsoft choosing to include the massive 512 megabytes of RAM that would ship with the console. Legend has it that during the game's early development, showcasing the ability of the Unreal Engine 3, there had been enough positive feedback about the game's visual realism that Mark Rain and Tim Sweeney used this to push Microsoft to double the amount of RAM that the console would hold, which was originally planned to be 256 megabytes. This decision allegedly cost the company a lot of money. In a Q&A at a community event in Canada, Rain explained, "So we argued and argued, and what Tim did is he actually sent a screenshot of what Gears of War would look like if we only had 256 megs of memory. And then I got a call from the chief financial officer of Microsoft Game Studios, and he said, 'I just want you to know, you cost me $1 billion. And I said, "We did a favor for 1 billion gamers." It reduced the amount of consoles they could sell on release, but it meant that Gears of War and future 360 titles would be able to use higher resolution textures. Something else that cost a pretty penny was the mother-of-pearl inlaid Xbox 360s that Bill Gates personally commissioned. Created with the intention of being gifts for VIP friends of Gates, he most famously gave one to the then-president of South Korea, Lee Myung-bak, while paying him a visit in May 2008. They were designed by mother-of-pearl artist Kim Yong-jun and produced by Kim's manufacturing company, Gukbo Art. The consoles featured imagery of ume flowers and butterflies representing peace and perseverance, with the final product being called Peace. At the time, only 3 of the special consoles were made, one for Gates, one for the president, and one for Kim. Since then, however, 100 more have been commissioned for production. There's been a few less than friendly acts surrounding the 360 as well. Richard Robinson of the MKR Group, who hold the rights for George Romero's film, Dawn of the Dead, attempted to sue Capcom for copyright infringement in 2008. The lawsuit claimed that Dead Rising, which was a 360 exclusive at the time, was just a video game version of Dawn of the Dead. To back up their claim, they listed several similarities between the two titles, such as: both works are set in a bi-level shopping mall. Both works are set in motion by a helicopter that takes the lead characters to a mall besieged by zombies. Many of the zombies wear plaid shirts. Both works use music in the mall for comedic effect. Both works are a parody of rampant consumerism. The dispute had been going on for a while, with Capcom even placing a disclaimer on the Dead Rising box, denying any relation to the original movie. Eventually coming to a head in February of that year, the case was handled by United States Magistrate Judge Richard Seaborg, who, after several months of back and forths, dismissed the case. Seaborg agreed with Capcom's motion that the few similarities MKR has alleged are driven by the wholly unprotectable concept of humans battling zombies in a mall during a zombie outbreak. It wasn't all smiles and rainbows for Capcom though, as much of the evidence they produced was thrown out due to being direct copies from Wikipedia. Dawn of the Dead is far from the only IP to be referenced in the Dead Rising series. In Dead Rising 2, Case West, there is an underground tunnel located beneath the holding pens of the Phenotrans facility. Here, written on the wall, are the words, "Don't startle the witch," with bloody handprints nearby and a vent beneath that leads to the sewers. If the player listens carefully, it's possible to hear the faint cries of a girl through the grate, a reference to the infamous witch zombie from Valve's Left 4 Dead series. And now going from killing zombies to killing a franchise, Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts was one of the last games Rare developed before being forced to invest their next few years in Kinect sports releases. Nuts and Bolts has many references to Rare's past works, including nods to Banjo-Kazooie with things like Stop and Swap. Just for those who don't know, The stop-and-swap mechanic was an unused method of transferring information between Nintendo 64 cartridges. The user would remove a cartridge, then swap in a new one, and the newly inserted game would read some information left in the N64's RAM from the previous cartridge. Because the feature was never implemented in the game, the mystery of Banjo-Kazooie's stop-and-swap content was often discussed by fans, which was ultimately referenced in Nuts and Bolts. In the game, if the player goes to Showdown Town, they can find the Tourist Information Center. Here, the player can talk to Bottles, who will exchange information for notes. One piece of information, labeled Stop and Swap Truth, can be purchased for 6,000 notes. However, there are only 5,230 notes in the game, making it impossible to purchase. This is unless you hack the game. Players discovered that purchasing the information is coded into the game, and can be bought if the note counter is increased to over 6,000. After purchasing the note, Bottles will say, "I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you, and we couldn't show that in a game with this rating. Put it out of your mind and think happy thoughts. Thanks for the notes." Another rare title, Cameo: Elements of Power, had a notoriously long development process. The game was originally planned for release on Nintendo 64, and then the GameCube, then the Xbox, and finally found its way to the Xbox 360. It was actually considered as a potential launch title for the GameCube, and earlier versions of the game had a much more Nintendo feel to them. Players would catch creatures, evolve them, and raise them into adulthood, with them following the player during gameplay and acting of their own volition. Most of these Pokemon-esque mechanics were scrapped when development moved to the Xbox. However, Rare's love of referencing its other games was not. Using the Thermite's lava bomb ability to blow up the door to the house in the Forgotten Forest Glade, the player can activate a small radio inside that plays a rock version of the Banjo-Kazooie theme tune. Speaking of blowing things up, in 2006, Hudson released Bomberman Act Zero. It already seemed to be the era of gritty remakes of old classics, with James Bond Casino Royale being released that same year, and Batman Begins the year before. Hudson also wanted to jump on the bandwagon, and did away with the iconic fun-loving Bomberman we all know, replacing it with a darker, more dystopian aesthetic. The concept still did not stray far from the original. Taking inspiration from descriptions found in the manual for the Famicom Classic, the team took the premise of the Bomberman escaping from a cramped underground dwelling and gave it a realistic twist. Unfortunately, the game performed so badly upon release and received such negative reviews that Hudson had no choice but to acknowledge it with a satirical short within an advertisement for their next Bomberman product, Bomberman Live, on XBLA.
But the question now comes down to, man, which version do we make? Do we make old cute classic Bomberman or radically post-apocalyptic Bomberman? What's the choice?
Well, as long as we make it a single-player game per console, then I think we should go with post-apocalyptic Bomberman.
Easter eggs and references like this aren't uncommon in the Halo franchise either. In fact, Halo 3 has a very specific Easter egg that took 7 years to come to light. The secret can be found by setting the Xbox 360's internal clock to December 25th, then booting up Halo 3 and loading any campaign level. From here, if they press both analog sticks down, the loading screen will start up with a much wider shot. By looking closely, it's possible to see the words "Happy Birthday, Lauren" spelled out on the ring's surface. This hidden message was put in the game by Adrian Perez, who dedicated it to his wife, Lauren. Even the beta of Halo 3 had Easter eggs and references. The beta included an achievement called Cheney Mania. This was unlocked by killing 10 opponents in a row with the shotgun without dying. This is a reference to George Bush Jr.'s Vice President Dick Cheney, who accidentally shot someone with a shotgun. And now it's time for this episode's random piece of trivia. Today, we'll be looking at The Urbs, Sims in the City. Trying to move the Sim series away from suburbs to inner city life, The Urbs also tried to give a hip, fresh take on the franchise, not just visually, but also with its soundtrack. Being released in 2004, contributions were made to the title's soundtrack by famed music group the Black Eyed Peas, who provided not just 9 of their songs to the game, but also created covers to have them better fit the Sims universe. The group went the extra mile with the game's soundtrack, covering their own tracks such as Shut Up and Get It Started, also known by another name that we can't say, thanks YouTube, with Shut Up Bruh and Gara Tada. An abbreviated version of Gara Tada is played during the game's opening intro, but by leaving the game's title screen running for 3.5 minutes, the full version of this song can be heard.
Who is it?
Looks like Chad Bannon. Clefairy?
How far did they jump?
Not as high as Corey Nelson.
Yeah, looks like his suit has an error 1355.
I bet you're next, Everett Lathrop.
Arcady Skywalker, what's our position?
Malcavio, you're next. Jackie H and Jettlestall 7, you move the body. Petite Mew, order us pizza. Beatus Vanus, which one is this?
Your boy Beowulf, sir.
Damn, I've never seen a patron jump as high as him.
Except for the Freemaster Gamers, sir.
Except for them.
Sir, Guillermo Chavez and Robert Cox are on the cleanup crew for the next jump. Trevor Wooten has sent the next drone up. Why Move Queen Mab is readying the trampoline.
That's right. Read my name, you dirty girl.
Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this episode. The Xbox 360 was probably the best console of its generation, if you ask me. So many amazing titles at such a prominent time in the industry. It's a shame the Xbox One really took a southern turn. The Xbox One really sucks, guys. I'm just gonna put it out there. I mean, we all know the 360 is great, but does it have real-time weapon change?